So, hello everybody. We are live on Facebook. I am accompanied with some amazing people, coaches on my team, Team Champion. I have Amy and Maria. Say hello.
Hi.
So today we're going to have a conversation about the current pandemic that's happening, more so as it relates to telemedicine, C&P preps, and kind of how to really get ready to deal with some of this stuff. So we give a few minutes for folks to kind of tune in a little bit. The topic today, again, that we're looking at is telemedicine as a whole, dealing with how things are happening now. So before we go around, let everybody kind of introduce themselves. DP here, veteran master coach at Team Champions, and I have Amy, one of our veteran coaches. So tell us a little bit about yourself, a little background real quick, so we kind of get some context for the conversation we're having.
Sure, I'm Amy. I'm from Colorado Springs. I am a disabled veteran of 11 years Air Force, and I was medically separated, and I joined VACI about August, September timeframe, and have been loving it since, and hopefully look forward to working with some of you on the call today.
Awesome. Maria.
Hey everyone. So my name is Maria. I am a veteran coach also. I actually joined VACI, I want to say sometime in November. I started off as a claim builder, then I moved up to I am from North Carolina originally, but my husband is actually stationed in California right now, so I am a military wife. I'm also an LVN, and I have a little bit of background in telehealth, so that's pretty much what we're going to be talking to you about today.
Awesome. One of the things we like to do a lot as we, kind of come on here and work with vets and do a live is we'll do like a little roll call. So if you're seeing us, definitely feel free to post, your branch of service, when you were in, how long you were in, just to be able to kind of highlight. We have some folks that popped in. So before we kind of kick off here, hello to Brian. Appreciate you being with us here. Michael, appreciate you. Good words definitely coming. Hey, John. We have Butch out there. Edward. Awesome. Jen, stick around. Good timing. I was trying to find out answers about C&P exams and scheduling. Ohio, thanks again for being here. Mike, appreciate you for being here as well. Michael, thank you for your service. 8202 Army. Awesome. Let's see. Hello from Iceland. Oh, awesome. Hey, Jamaica. What's up, B? Seattle, Washington's here. Cedar Rapids. A lot of great folks popping in here. Hey, Lisa. Let's see. Got the boom. We got San Antonio in the house. Yep, Tony, your comment is live, so we are live. Hey, Jim. And that's why we do this here, is to really show you that we're live as we're popping up the messages here. So just wanted to, kind of check in. Thomas, thank you for your service. We appreciate you. Alex, thank you for your service. Ray, thank you for your service. George, we appreciate you, my brother. Thank you for your service. Edward, thank you for your service. Connie, hey, what's going on over there? How's the weather down that way? Navy, Sheldon, appreciate you. Thank you for your service. Terrence, Semper Fi, thank you for your service. Aloha from Houston. Charlotte's in the house. Aaron, thank you for your service, my brother. John, thank you for your service. Austin, Texas is here. Air Force, retired, Las Vegas, thank you for your service. Steve, USMC, Marine Corps, thank you for your service. Henry, Army 16, thank you for your service, my brother. Tadeus, thank you for your service. A lot of hellos and so forth. Awesome, thank you, Michael, thank you for your service, and everyone. A lot of great. Let's see. Oh, Dave, hey brother, hey David, what's going on, my man? Thank you for your service, Larry. Thank you. Let's see here. New Jersey, awesome. Hey Dana. So it's keep on popping, and we'll pop them up as we go through. But I think it's just kind of cool to be able to highlight and thank everyone for their service and their time in. So a few things that we really wanted to touch on today is really the C&P aspect of things. It's no secret that we're dealing with a new state of affairs. And I think it's a timely conversation because when we talk about C&P preparations and we start to look at how to conduct yourself, how to actually go in there and be prepared to have a conversation, that's difficult as is. Add the caveat of telemedicine into this whole ordeal, it changes the dynamic for many. So the background that we have is kind of looking at a few different things. Maria, coming from the LPN side, has conducted telemedicine examinations, consults, and things. So, not only is she a coach in our team, but she's also from the medical fields, understands how that really relates over, right? How to be able to communicate certain things via telemedicine. And more so as it comes to the C&P. So many of us have dealt with having to use a computer, having to use a camera and relay things. So, Maria, let me ask you, on your side of the house, when you dealt with patients, and I think it's a good way to start, right? Because I think we want to focus on what do we do? I'm scared. But to start off from the medical side, when you first began to look at using telemedicine, is that something on the medical side that just all providers knew? Or is there also a level of, this is new, I'm uncomfortable, how do I use this, right? Because we don't look at it from the patient side, right, the veteran side, but we don't factor in that there's another person on the other side who may or may not be versed in this technology. So can you talk a little bit about that?
So I was actually the first telehealth nurse that they hired. When I moved here, my background is home health. So when I went into the interview, I was interviewing for a home health position. Back then, we also used to do telehealth calls, but they weren't like through a computer or a camera. It was pretty much a phone call. And he's like, well, could we incorporate the telehealth part where you actually are able to see them through a camera? And I'm like, yeah, I think I could do that. And it's really nerve-wracking too, especially if it's your first time getting in front of a camera, talking to the patient. I pretty much had to come up with my own plan on how to assess the patient, because they just pretty much told me it's a regular assessment, go ahead and do it. So I had to think of ways to communicate with my patient, doing my assessment over a computer, not actually physically being there. So it's not just nerve-wracking for the patient, it's actually nerve-wracking for the provider also. It was a lot of having to make sure that I was hitting all the points that we're supposed to, like with the assessment, and it helped the patient prepare more, because a lot of the times when we told them about it and we introduced the topic, they were like, well, I don't want to do this, I really don't feel comfortable with it, or I'm not good with technology. That's a lot of big one. People are saying they're not very good in technology. And once they actually had somebody, we had a nurse actually go out and then talk to them, explain to them the benefits. I would make phone calls and explain to them, look, if one day we're not able to come out, if it's an emergency and we don't have a nurse available, the telehealth call would help you. So that kind of got them interested into it, and it actually did help them a lot. And like I said, I did have to start off like from the very beginning. I had to plan my own stuff on how to hit every part of the assessment, which it was the challenge. And I'm pretty sure now that the VA has moved into telehealth C&Ps, it was a challenge for them too, starting off, because it's something new to them. So I'm pretty sure the examiners are like, well, I really don't know how this is going to go. They have to face some challenges also, but eventually you get through it, because it's almost the exact same way of doing a physical assessment or an assessment when you're in person. You just have to work around it.
And that's a good point. I know we talked a little bit about this yesterday when we started looking at the topic, or kind of just reviewing some things. When Amy brought up a good point, and I want you to share that, right? As far as some of the conversations you had with your medical provider and some of the benefits they're seeing and challenges, right? Because we're looking at, right, Maria just gave a perspective on the medical side. So the key point, bottom line there is, it's new to them, right? As new as it is to you, it's new to a lot of these providers, right? They don't know what they're doing. There's communication errors, things drop. You see us deal with this stuff here. So it's new to them. So that's one perspective. But then also looking at civilian care as a whole, right? Because this is beyond the VA. This is just the new norm of where we're at. What was it that your provider shared with you briefly, Amy, as far as them seeing some of the benefits, right? Because I think the bigger picture here, and we're going to get tactical into some of the things to look at for the C&P, but to frame, what's happening right now, I think it's good to understand that this is the new normal. This is not going to change. Before I segue over to Amy here, we pulled some stats, and we actually have a blog post that we'll share with some of the information. So stay tuned for that. We'll drop in the comments here or on the title itself after it's posted or we're done. But statistic-wise, we ran some numbers, and looking at 2013, 52% of hospitals were using telemedicine. As of 2020, 76 were reporting to have been using telehealth, telemedicine to diagnose and treat and so forth. The VA has been ahead of the ball game when it comes to a lot of this. They've been embracing things. Many have said they've been given tablets and things like that for care. But right now, some of the newer data is not necessarily out there because it's real time, right? We're dealing with the pandemic. Things are happening overall. But the virtue and benefit there, I think they're starting to find solutions, right? Community care is an option, but now looking at telemedicine, that really bridges the gap for many individuals because that's what community care is trying to bridge. So they found a decrease of about 32% in admissions to hospitals for those with acute psychiatric needs because they were able to reach out and use different things to reach out to their medical providers, right, to get that care. So two terms that are worth mentioning here is synchronously, being able to meet with your provider, and asynchronously, which is one is live like this, and one is you can send a video, they send one back to you. So a lot of neat things are happening right now. So I would definitely encourage folks to look into these things that are available. The VA has a lot of apps. Again, the blog will detail some of the information that we're going to share. But on your side, Amy, what was some of the things that your provider kind of shared with you regarding telemedicine?
Sure. So I've been seeing my provider for quite some time, and so this is all kind of new. And one thing that we did talk about, I always ask her, what she thinks, how's it going, and at first it was a big adjustment to her because she's never done this before. But now that she's gotten into it, she's realized that the patient satisfactory is increased significantly. A lot of people, especially veterans, but even kids, people that aren't veterans have some anxiety when it comes to actually physically going to the appointment. I know personally, I would rather do it from my home. I feel more comfortable. I feel more relaxed. I feel more at ease. I feel just in my own space. It makes me feel better. One thing that she did say, as far as kids, that I think is important and can go both ways is she had a couple teenage girls who were really struggling in school and were being bullied a lot, and she just really struggled, the crying a lot during their appointments, a lot of anxiety going to their appointments. And ever since things have changed with the COVID-19 and she's been seeing them online, she's found that they're a totally different person. They're happy, they're not as anxious, they're more willing to open up. And I think sometimes when you're in your own environment and you feel comfortable, whether it's in your bed, your couch, outside, whatever it may be, when you're in your own environment, it makes you feel a little bit more comfortable, and you're a little bit more willing to kind of open up and talk. And sometimes it's a struggle for a lot of veterans to just get into their car and go to their appointment. Something else she said is that her cancellation rate has gone significantly down. The no-shows and the cancellation, because you know what, if they're in bed and it wakes them up and they can, talk while they're in bed, or they can, talk while they're taking care of their kids, it saves them a lot of time, and it just makes them feel a little bit more comfortable. And I think, to be honest, since September 11th, it has kind of started going this way. And in general, it's going this way. A lot of times, like, I just needed to refill my prescription for my migraine medicine, and I sent a message to my provider. My provider faxed it to the VA. The VA sent it to me, and there was no middleman. It was just a simple message that got taken care of, and a week later I got my medicine. So I think that this is the way that it's going, and it's beneficial, especially for a lot of vets that have anxiety and they don't want to leave and they don't want to be around people. When you go to the veteran centers, the VA hospitals, it can be overwhelming for a lot of people when there's a lot of people there. A lot of people have their service dogs. Sometimes people are upset. It makes them nervous. And so to be able to have this one-on-one with a doctor where it's just you two and you don't have the workup of going, I think it's beneficial. And she also did, my girls counselor was explaining the same sort of thing, and she said that she's noticed that the use of anxiety medication and depression medication amongst kids is lowering. And so there's something to be said about that too, about just kids being out, and it's a rough world out there for kids, and the bullying and what goes on. So I think it's looking from the younger generation to the older generation, and it's something to be said for that. And statistically, I think it's about 74% of patients say that they're more comfortable doing it over telehealth versus doing it in person. Now, of course, you have the initial appointments that you have to, sometimes go to, or ever so often your doctor wants you to come in when it's time to refill your medications. But for me personally, I'd rather go in once every 3 months than once every month, or once every 6 months than once every 3 months. And so I find it to be a huge benefit for me. And I think feedback from my clients, especially when it comes to C&P, has been really, really good. They feel a lot more comfortable. They feel a lot more open to talk. And sometimes it's easier to talk to a screen. It's just like when you're texting. Sometimes it's easier to say things in text message that you wouldn't say in person. So I think that when you are just looking at someone over the screen, I think you're able to be a little bit more vulnerable and a little bit more open to what's going on, so they can really get a good snapshot of what you're going through.
And that's a good point. So, we're going to stay on task with the topic that we have for today, but we're going to come back and have another live, and we're going to talk about how to help, your spouse filing claims. Maria, as a coach and a spouse, is going to shed some light on that. Amy is going to come back with Kenneth and do a live on military sexual trauma, which will be separate. But I think it's good to be able to point this one out here, though. So what you just said, Amy, you're a veteran. Can you share very briefly, not go into detail, what you went to the VA to get rated for, right? MST. And from your perspective, right, as a veteran who's a survivor of MST, how hard was it for you to get to the point of filing a claim for MST and talking about this, then having to go somewhere, see someone face to face, in contrast to, let's say, using telemedicine, right? Just you as a veteran alone. You're not a coach now or anything like that. How hard was it for you to get to that point of coming forward, and now knowing what you know about telemedicine, do you think that would have made it easier for you, or maybe helped you step up sooner?
Absolutely. I have a serious avoidance when I have to talk to somebody about something that's difficult. I have a hard time looking them in their face, and I look all around. And you always have that fear. And those there's so many people out there that they can relate when it comes to MST or assault, anything like that. Is you always have that fear. The burden of proof is almost on you, and there are a lot of people that they want to question you, or they want to say, well, how can you prove this? Or, well, I don't believe you. Well, you never reported it. You never talked about it. And it really belittles a lot of people, and it totally discourages them to want to talk about it. So I've had two in the last 2 weeks that have done their MST over like this Skype, and they felt so much better about it. They felt like they could control the conversation a little bit more, and they weren't as distracted, because when you're in person, a lot of times you feel like they're just taking notes. They're just taking notes, and you don't know what the notes are, and your anxiety builds up, and then you get afraid, and then you can shut down really quick. Whereas if you're, person to person, and you've got some coaching and you're confident, then I was in a fortunate situation because mine was reported. So I was back in 2005 where it just started the restricted and non-restricted, and I chose to do the restricted. So that helped. And a lot of people, even though they choose to do the restricted, a lot of C&P examiners, they can still kind of put the burden of proof on you, and they make them feel very little. Where the last two that I've talked to felt very comfortable doing it one-on-one, and they actually felt like the C&P examiner was actually listening to them and was focused, and that was not, they weren't all over the place. They felt like they could look at the camera, they could talk to them, they answered questions, and one of them even said, I'm not going to make you relive this. I read your report, and we're going to call it good, good from here. They just wanted to talk about how it still affects them to this day. So I think, coming from where I had to report it, everything was paper, I had to go through interviews, and kind of be judged, if you will, and the burden of proof is on you, and maybe they believe you, maybe they don't, versus being able to just I feel a little bit more confident behind the screen, and knowing my story, and knowing that I don't have to sit next to this person, and I can just
be judged or be looked at or anything like that. Because one point that I have to interject here, many of you guys have seen us go live, share things. You've heard Brian Reese talk about it. And the one part I think people lose, right? And again, this is framing the conversation for telemedicine, is this right here can be misleading, right? Just because you see us here, we're talking, we may joke, we may do a thing, we're not physically next to each other. I'm, at the end of the day, sitting in a chair, looking at a computer, looking at a camera, right? There is no one seeing me, right? And for Brian and for us, sometimes people may say, well, how do you guys, you guys are fine, or whatever the case may be. You don't know what happens when the camera goes off, right? Like, this camera can go off and literally, Amy shuts down, right? Or Maria has, a migraine, or I'm done for the day. This is, what you're doing here for a moment. So I think in having to come up and go to the C&P, share your truth, right? One of the biggest things we talk about is sharing your truth, right? You've got to be uncomfortably vulnerable. And we'll touch a little bit on that here in a second, but it's really that there's so many things at play that the last thing that you can take away is that extra layer of fear, right? Because now I'm here and I can control the narrative, right? And we'll talk about some of the things that you have to keep in mind also, but I want to flip over to Maria real quick and look at from your side, right? So to Amy's point, again, one, thank you for sharing a little bit about that. Again, we'll have another live that we'll do about military sexual trauma with Amy and Kenneth, and how to actually get to that point. But Maria, on your side, both as a coach and being a nurse, is that something on your side that you're receptive to? And I mean in the sense where here's now your patient, right? Amy coming to be examined or whatever the case may be. And one, that you might not know how to use this technology too much, but she's anxious and this isn't easy for her, right? What are some of the things you're looking at, right? Because you mentioned before you have a checklist, right? Same thing as a C&P, right? They're checking certain things. Are you orientated to time, place, etc.? What are some of the things that you would say to now start looking at for tips or advice for her to be able to better communicate that, right? Because one of the things that I'll kind of lobby up here as an alibi is if I were sitting here right now, the one thing no one is seeing that I'm doing is tapping my foot, right? No one sees that I've been basically playing with this case here for the past 10 minutes, right? So it's out of sight, so you don't see it, right? And it's little things like that that folks don't realize that I can get away with now. So it's great for me because I can sit here, have a conversation, do a thing, but you don't hear or see me tapping. You don't see me doing certain things. However, in this space, you can't hide those things, right? You need to be uncomfortably vulnerable because one thing I would offer to all of you, and we talked about this ad nauseum, and we keep hammering it for folks that are going to C&Ps, is you want to share your truth to you. So when we say coaching, it's not, hey, Amy, say a thing here or there. That's not what's happening here. It's more, your truth. You know what you need to say. How do you convey said message? When you're in front of someone, I can tell, right? Again, I'm going to defer to Maria, but I can tell if Amy is sitting here, nervous. I can see if she's sweating and wrangling her arms and doing a thing. I can see all that. So that all that body language is telling me something. The problem we have in this technology space is we don't understand that there's certain things that now the human perception doesn't pick up on, right? So in any capacity, this factors in, right? There's a plant behind me, there's a map, there's a Marine Corps degree. Automatically now you get a vibe of kind of who I am as a person, right? Those little small things are saying something about me. There's a map because I've traveled, there's a degree because I went to school. That for someone becomes to be, hey, you went there too? Those little things mean something. So in the real world, when you walk into someone's office, what do you see? You see things that they have in front of them. So the same way you take all that in, they're taking you in as well. So now when you are the patient, how are you presenting yourself and giving those truths? Because you want to be able to show and tell on those specific things. So how to do that is what we're going to start getting into here. But Maria, on your point, when you're looking at someone, what are some of those things that you would give advice for someone to better communicate some of the things they might be dealing with, especially for mental health? Because again, that's what the majority of C&Ps are going to be right now, because the manual ones where they have to see you are being postponed and things like that. So specifically to those type of C&Ps, what are some things that, one, you've noticed by dealing with dealing with patients, and then as a coach that you've given advice to them on how to better present themselves in a telemedicine type of environment as it relates to the C&P?
So a lot of it does go back to the C&P basics, of course. Know your DBQ. One thing that we always taught our patients was learn the signs and symptoms of something you need to report to us. So same thing with the DBQ. Learn your symptoms, know what each of them are. Something that they're not going to be able to see, like you said, you fiddling with the case, bring that up to them. You can always write things down. If you have your exam tomorrow and today you it's like you are very anxious, nervous. Just going out in a public place makes you anxious. Tell them that during that exam, because it's probably not going to happen during there, because during the exam you're going to be at home. You're not going to be in a public place. So things like that, let them know that. Of course, it's not happening there and then, but whenever you do get to do your exam, let them know it happened. Write down everything that happens to you that you may experience on your daily life, but that day it's probably not going to happen. Like you said, you're at home, you're pretty much hiding from not physically being there, so you're hiding the little things that you are experiencing. Observation is like very, very hard on the telehealth part, because right now I am only seeing DP here, just his face. I see only Amy, just her face. I can't see the little things they're doing. And like I said, we do try to get our patients to be prepared for that call. You need to get prepared for that exam also. Anything that's not something normal to somebody else, that's abnormal to you, you need to bring it up.
And that's a good point, Charlie. And if you guys have questions, feel free to start populating them and putting them in the comments, and we'll bring them up. But this is a key point here that we've stressed a lot. The fact is, you're never going to see that doctor again, right? So if you're going in person, it's hard enough. The reality is this, right? You're controlling some of the narrative here. You're in your house. You're able to have this session. Own it, right? Make a point to really just put it all out there, because again, you want to begin to start phrasing some of the things that they might not be able to see, right? For many of you, like in Amy's case or any other veteran who maybe had something traumatic happen, PTSD, personal assault, military sexual trauma, let them know how you feel. It feels kind of counterintuitive here, but because of telemedicine, you have to really project things, right? Think of actors, not in the sense of putting out a script, but the fact that they have to project what is happening, right? So the reality is, if I am sitting here speaking to, let's say, Nurse Maria for a thing, if I'm nervous, I'm going to say that I am nervous, right? Literally project and say those things of what's happening, because this is your shot. This is my shot to have a conversation for what I'm finally getting seen for, right? Maybe it took me 5 years to get here, 10 years to get here, 20 years to get here, 30 years to get here. You have to leave it on the table. And what I mean by that is, you have to get to the point of saying, this is where it's all coming out, right? You have to be able to explain that this is something that's difficult for me, right? This is something that I've held away for a long period of time, and today we're having this conversation. For many of you, right, looking specifically at, let's say, mental health and CMPs, one of the things that I shared a few days ago on one of our team C&P preps is, I need you all to look at this from the context of, not only you want to put things out there, project, and be able to say your truth, but there's another aspect here, and it comes down to, you need to literally open Pandora's box.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that many of us normalize things, and here's the reality. I use the limp analogy a lot because it helps, because what I don't want people to do is walk into a CMP and go into a nervous breakdown, emotional breakdown, because basically they're saying things and owning things. What I mean by that is, if Amy was hit by a vehicle and she from that resulted in having a limp, for the rest of her life she has a limp. Is Amy the limp, or is it the fact that she got hit by a vehicle? And I mention that because many of us are dealing with mental health conditions, and what happens is, you start to identify that you are the limp, right? I am the PTSD. I am the MST. I am the SDD. I am the MDD, right? I am all these things. And the reality is, no, I live with said things, but it's because of something that happened. We forget that the person was hit by a vehicle, right? Amy isn't a limp. She was hit by a vehicle, hence she limps. Hence she cannot play, nor run, nor do the things she used to do. From a mental health perspective, it's the same thing. Maria experienced this traumatic event, so now she has the inability to do certain things in life. Now, here's the piece. I have to preface that, right? Preface that, because the next part is the part that I don't want you to get hung up on, but I need you to go. I need you to own the reality of a few things. In Amy's case, let's use her mental health. Mine's. You failed in many areas of your life. Don't suck it up. Don't blame anyone. The reality is, you haven't been able to hold a job for more than 3 years at a time. This applies to someone watching. You haven't been able to maintain effective relationships, right? Like, you have all the symptoms, but truly now, what does that mean? 3 divorces. You can't keep a job for more than 3 or 5 years. You tried to start your own business thinking that you just need to be an entrepreneur, and you failed at that because no one wanted to work with you, right? So 3, 4, 5 divorces later, many jobs failed. You were great in the military. You went to Ivy League schools. You did all this great stuff that should have had you somewhere. And here's the reality. You are a 50, 60, 70, 80-year-old veteran who looks in the mirror and doesn't recognize who's looking back at them. Did you imagine yourself being where you're at right now? When you were 17 and you put your right hand up, or whatever age you were, you saw and envisioned a place and how you would be at a certain time, right? You wanted to retire, be on the farm, do a thing. You can't walk. There goes the farm. You can't ride a horse. There goes that. All the things you want to do, you cannot do. Your kids are estranged. You have no relationships. No one knows who you are. You failed in many areas of life. I'm not saying go into a negative, I failed. No, I have been dealing with a limp. And the problem is many of us have identified that we are those failures, right? The reality is that Billy out there or Bob out there, Vietnam veteran, your kids don't even know who you are. If your wife were to say that back in the day, Billy was a dancing machine and the life of the party, your nephews and kids would be like, who are you talking about? Grandpa Bob dancing? Okay, sure. He was the life of the party. He went away to service. He did things, experienced things. Things happened. She experienced things. Things happened. And now Amy is not the life of the party. Bob is not the life of the party. And what's been robbed is not that you can't cut a rug anymore, even though we'd love to see that happen, right? But it's that experience that your kids, your nephews, your friends have been robbed. Right? The fact of the matter is that Amy's kids have been robbed of experiences and moments that she is unable to have with them because of her mental health, absent getting therapy and getting to a place of working there. And saying these things suck because the thing is you have to own it, right? You have to sit there as that 50, 60, 70-year-old man, woman, and say, I have failed at life. My businesses have failed. My relationships have failed. I have not been able to do the things I set out to do. They started off great. I failed. I am unable to do this. That is occupational and social impairment. Show what that is. Don't normalize it. Oh, it wasn't differences. No, you can't keep a wife. You can't keep a husband. You can't keep a relationship. You can't keep employees. You cannot do these things. But not you. What you just realized is that your mental health condition is what's been anchoring you down, what's been holding you down. Right? The limp is why you can't go out there and run and play basketball and play soccer and all the things you used to do because you have a limp. So in mental health capacity, it's the same exact thing, right? So I had to preface that and give you the example of the limp because when you're going into the C&P prep and you're having this telemedicine thing, I am having a conversation with you. I don't recognize who sees me in the mirror, right? What I thought I would see today is not who's looking back at me, and I don't like it. It is why I have let myself go. It is why I've let my hygiene go to the side. It is why I have obsessional rituals that interfere with daily activities of living. And what does that mean? It means not that you just go into a thing, right? It's great that your symptom says that one of the things you have is obsessional rituals, but what does that mean? It means that you didn't just binge Netflix. No, you tried to escape reality because you hate your life. You don't want to embrace reality, so you haven't eaten all day. The trash didn't go out. You didn't do the things you should have done, right? The kids didn't get picked up from a school, or a thing didn't happen, or you didn't get to work. That's what obsessional rituals, which interfere with daily activities of living, means, right? Did you go down a rabbit hole of YouTube looking up something? I given the Roomba example, right? I spent 4 or 5 hours looking at a Roomba review to buy a Roomba, and my wife's like, seriously, you could have been done already. I was sold at the one you had, but I had to look at all the reviews. I had to look at the thing. Paralysis by analysis, right? But that's my truth. That's my reality. And guess what didn't happen? Dinner didn't happen because I was too busy looking at this stuff and I wasn't with the family doing that stuff. So I share that to say and try to, obviously, bring up the pace here because I don't want people to sit there and try to reach for a bottle. But when you're going to the C&P, this is the conversation you need to have. Right? There's no place here to put this stuff and try to just play it up. You need to go for the truth. Own your failures. Own the things that you are not proud of saying out loud. Don't normalize it. Right? It's not, I sucked it up and drove on and made the best of what I was given. I was given some lemons and I made some lemonade. No. No lemonade. No lemons. You have a limp. You have PTSD. You have MDD. You were sexually assaulted. You were physically assaulted. You experienced trauma. Now you have to tell your truth. When you add on top of that telemedicine, I have to be able to say this and preface it with saying I have never spoken about this in 20, 30 years. My wife doesn't even know. My kids have never even met me. The person they know is who I thought it was. They met the limp. They never knew that it was a time where I did not have the limp. And when you realize that, it's a blow and it sucks. And that's why we encourage you to get help and get therapy, because what sucks more than living that life for 20, 30 years of not knowing, it's knowing. Because now I know what I'm doing, and if I don't get therapy and I don't get help, it gets worse. So avoiding being a statistic is being honest with yourself, but not owning and saying, I'm the limp, I don't deserve to be here. But no, I'm the limp. Now how do I regain my independence and try to do new different things? Right? But you can't get there until you get to this point. So many of you just realized you had a mental health condition. Now the process isn't just the CMP. So when you're going in there, it's not, oh, well, I just want what I'm due to me. No, I want my life back. What little bit is left. I don't care if you're 80, if you're 70, if you're 60, if you got 5 or 10 or 20 years to go. Try to make those years the best years you have to begin to work towards getting better. For your kids, for your grandkids, for those around you who have been robbed of all the goodness that is you. So that CMP is what gets you the rating, that gets you that care, that gets you maybe the meds, that gets you maybe this or that, because now you have that resource, right? That's the conversation and attitude you have to go in there. Because if you're going in there with I just want to get paid for a thing because no. You were paid for service. It's what today is happening. What is today's situation? Especially in this. So that's where you need to be as far as your mentality. We're not going to go into every symptom, but in a telemedicine environment conversation, this is the kind of conversation you need to be able to have. And I have to tell and say, look, I don't like saying these things. This may be the first time I've said this out loud, outside of the therapist who I just told I had an MST situation. Now I'm sharing this with you. You're person number 2 or person number 3. This ain't easy. So I may be upset, I may cry, I may shake, I may be physically bothered because this is something that's been buried away for a long time, and maybe I just found out what this is. So to Maria's point, to Amy's point, I need to be able to project and say what is happening, right? This doesn't feel good, Doc. I'm telling you, this is driving me crazy, but I got to get it out. I'm over here shaking like a freaking tree leaf in the wind, but I got to get it out because this is my truth. Right? And this is how I'm able to communicate that. So the telemedicine piece, it can be used in your benefit because I control this, right? If I had to say everything I just said in a crowd of 20 people, it might not have came out the way it just came out, right? I'm making examples of generalities, but a lot of that stuff is just me. That's my story. That's my reality. That's my truth. But I can say it here very freely because I control the narrative of the computer, right? Of the camera. So for all of you, it's really being able to give examples and talk about your truth and use this benefit that, hey, I'm cool. Because at the end of the day, I'll never see any of you guys in life. I'm going to shut this off and go about my business. I don't see the 152 people watching right now and how many more will watch after this, right? It's just me having a conversation, telling my truth. So for you all, you have to go to a place of really embracing the suck and being open about it. Put your ego aside. Don't care you're a Marine. Don't care your Army. Don't care your Air Force. Put all of that aside because Amy's trauma is as valid as Maria's trauma, as valid as my trauma, as valid as a guy who rappelled into Mogadishu or was in Iraq doing great things or in Vietnam doing this or the Korean War doing that. Trauma is trauma is trauma is trauma. We need to stop tearing each other down on this whole, oh, you think you had it bad there, Amy? Let me tell you about my time. Stop. That's why none of us have been able to get help. We're too busy. Let me tell you about my one time in Vietnam. Well, let me tell you what happened in Fallujah. Well, let me tell you what happened in Afghanistan. What's happened today? What's happening now? Right? And to bring it to context, today, what's happening, many of us are in a pressure cooker. You're stuck in the house. You can't go out. So just because you haven't had a road rage incident, it doesn't mean those things are gone. It means that it's still there. You just haven't left the house yet. Right? So I'll push it back to Maria. I went on a little tangent there, but I think it's applicable to this piece. But on your side, working with veterans, Maria, on your side, what are some of the things that you have found as far as feedback that has helped for that? And then we'll start switching here into questions as well. As far as being able to tell their truth, period, right? Telemedicine or not.
So it's actually been very, the CMPs that I've had, some of them had to drive like 3 hours. So, and at one time when I was doing my one-on-one CMP with one of my vets, he's like, how am I going to make it through this? just driving this 4 hours, thinking about this. Um, it was really, really nerve-wracking. And actually, one of my vets had a C&P, her first time telehealth. It was more of an abusive thing, and it wasn't as scary to her because, like you said, they don't really share this with a lot of people. It could have been like the third or fourth person that they shared it with, and it was very, very. It was a lot easier for her. I know it wasn't like she had kids at home and everything. She was a little bit worried about that, but it would have been a lot worse her having to drive the 2 hour drive or the 4 hour drive that my other vets had to do. So it was a lot more comforting for her to do it at home instead of driving somewhere else. Feel that anxiety up for 4 hours. And then having to sit there for however long they have to wait. And then having all them people around her, it just made it would have been a lot worse than to be at home and do it. So it does, like, it is a little bit trickier for you to come across, or tell your story and the observation pretty much. It's very difficult for the C&P examiner to make that observation, but it's a lot easier on the vet just being at home and being comfortable there. So the observation, it is a little bit more that the vet has to express themselves. That's like the key point. Make your point across. Let them know everything that is happening to you. The things that they're not able to see, let them know. Because they're not going to note that. They're probably not even going to ask you. So you need to make the point to let them know, look, my feet have been tapping for like the past 30 minutes just sitting here talking to you.
Palms are sweaty. I'm in a pool of sweat. All those little markers, all those little things, over-communicated. One question that came up was what is not being used via telemedicine. So for those in-person exams where you're looking at ranges of motion and things like that, there's technology out there for that, but those are the ones we're seeing being deferred to not be seen, right? But those things where it's a record review, speaking, let's say, like migraines or sleep apnea, internal things where they're not physically having to look at range of motion and things like that, those are the ones we're seeing that they're still pushing forward. Dana asked about service dog for MST. We're actually going to have a conversation about that also soon here. But for PTSD or mental health as a whole, a service dog is something you could definitely look into, especially to be able to work with you, right? What are those things that service dog is going to be able to do, right? There's a difference between an emotional support animal and a service dog. So when you're looking at a service dog, that dog is going to be specifically trained to work with you in certain things and help you, right? I shared a quick story as far as like my service dog and training Legend and how we're doing things. So those that don't know, I actually have, that's why I have my little avatar there. So little plug for Legend there. So I have my service dog and training Legend, and he's task trained, right? So there's different things he's trained to be able to alert and detect. Similar to if you're looking at a medical alert dog, right? They can look at if you're going to have a diabetic situation or what have you. So the answer is yes for that. So for sure. Let's see. Ellison, I have an upcoming appointment with SSD for QTC. Ellison, what I would say there, so we'll do a little rapid fire. So Maria, for SSD, what are some of the things that you would give advice on to talk about how best to have said C&P and talk about how SSD and their rated conditions are, affecting them?
So back to your lamp story that you said, let them know how you probably don't think about it. I always tell my vets, since the day we start our strategy, you probably don't think about it, of the way your foot is affecting your daily life, how a back problem could take you 5 minutes, 10 minutes to get up in the morning. Let them know all this stuff and look at your DBQ, learn your DBQ, learn your signs and symptoms, but make notes from the beginning, from the start of your process. Make notes of how little things are impacting your life. Picking up a cup of coffee. One of my vets said he has trouble just picking up a coffee. That you really don't, some people don't really bring that up and say, well, it was because of my service-connected disability. It's just I just can't pick it up. No, that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
If your wrist had not broken 10 years ago, you probably would have been able to pick that cup of coffee like anybody else would have. So little things like that, bring it up. Like I said, make examples from the very beginning. Write them down because some people have trouble remembering this stuff. Write it down. And I know we're going to talk about this in a different live, but talk to your family members, talk to your spouses, because they may see something that you do not see. So start getting prepared. Prepare with them. Let them know. Talk to them. See what they have to say. Like if for your allowing you to have family time with your people, ask your wife how that's affecting her, how that makes them feel. So talking to them would make a very big difference too. You'll see more things about yourself that you probably do not notice.
A good question that came up was, can you show pictures of scars? Yes. That's proof of what you're dealing with, what you have. So that's a separate one there. So I'd say that would be a good one. One thing that I would add to Maria, that I'm going to ask Amy for her input on that one, because SSD is a big one. We've had veterans with literally 10, 20, 30% rated conditions and been awarded, 100%. And it's not everybody gets to a number. That veteran had the symptoms and the argument to get to that point. But what I would also offer is, if I was a surgeon and I could not use my hands anymore, what would that impact be to me psychologically, right? If you are a person like a gentleman who we saw come through the program, was a handyman, used his hands to do things. He comes from a day and age where you look a man in the eye, you shake his hand, you make a deal, and you go on about your business. And his inability to do that thing basically takes his manhood away. It takes his ability to make a deal and do a thing. And that impact is no different than a man who has erectile dysfunction. It's no different than a woman who has female sexual arousal disorder and has the inability to be aroused with her partner because of the trauma she's dealt with, right? So even if FSAD or ED has a rating of X, 0, in this case, the psychological impact is what's neglected in that. So for SSD, somatic symptom disorder, what we're looking at is, what is the secondary thing that has happened there, right? Have you had a divorce? Have you had instances where, because of your inability to do certain things, that has affected that, right? I had a man, one of my older vets, his daughter moved out, basically got her own place, and he was a handyman. So guess what he was going to do when his little girl got her own place, right? He'd help her paint, he'd help her put things up, and he can't climb a stairs or a ladder because of balance issues and all the things he deals with. So now he has to pay someone else to help his daughter do what he was supposed to be able to do. Think about that. If you can't walk and you can't now have that first dance with your daughter when she gets married, you mean to tell me that's not going to affect you? Right? These are the things no one thinks about that are true that we deal with. And it's like, how many of those moments are robbed because you can't walk, because you can't do this? So that's what the SSD tie-in is. It's looking at how these things truly are affecting you beyond the rated condition. Yes, you have 40% for the back condition or knees or what have you, but what impact does that have beyond, right, the actual physical thing? What is the psychological toll? So we said yes for the pictures there. Let's see here. You're welcome, Dana. Hiram, love you, brother. Appreciate you, my man. Let's see here. Got a few questions, just kind of going through them. Tony said, Maria, that is so true. I had my family members remind me of things that I did so I could put them in my notes for my C&P. Amy, on your side, when you're dealing with clients and veterans, what have you noticed are some of those, like, I guess, aha moments when those vets come back with their, report, with their statements or buddy statements or the wife statements that they're like, I didn't even know that, right? We've had veterans who literally found out they're about to get served divorce papers when they went to go file. It's just like, I didn't know my wife saw me that way. Or I had my 18-year-old son write a letter and the letter said, I don't even know who this man is.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, what are some of your insights on that?
So I'm a huge, I always tell my veterans I'm a huge fan of writing. I like all my veterans to write, and I feel like I've had very good success with writing. I've had people who, their recommendation was 70%. They were already at 70%, but their letter was one that would make me have to walk away for a little bit. Writing is huge, and I just finished a client last week, and he, we were talking about his case, and he went, it was the fastest, my record anyways, basically 2 days. They made a decision, and I contribute a lot of that to the writing. Now, when they read their wife's letter, it's like, wow, I didn't realize I was doing that. Whether it's forgetting things, whether it's writing things backwards, whether it's the irritability, whether, whatever it is. And I've had some veterans' wives that they don't want the veteran to see the letter because they're afraid of how they might react, or they don't really want to, and you read them and you're like, wow, and I do find that after we talk about SSD, because a lot of people don't really understand SSD so much, and they think I don't have any mental health conditions, and but when you talk about mental health, there was a story that Brett Robinson, he's another coach, that he talks about, and it's a great story, and he talks about how there was a guy who grew up, I think it was hunting, and he hunted with his kids, and it was something that they looked forward to every single year. And as his kids got older, then it was the grandkids, and then it got to the point where he couldn't do it anymore. And to him, that was devastating to him. That was something that he looked forward to his whole life, and he couldn't do it anymore. And so when you think about how things affect you socially and occupationally, it's those things. Maybe you used to be able to do X, Y, and Z, and you could build yourself a shop. And even though you probably could build yourself a shop now, it's not as easy, and that creates a lot of frustration and anxiety, and that almost feeling of failure. That's SSD. That's affecting you socially and occupationally. And I always tell people, when they wake up in the morning, how do they feel? What hurts? Chronic pain, that's SSD. It doesn't mean, and people don't like to clump that into like mental health, but in reality, that's something that you're dealing with that affects you socially and occupationally. And so I always try to tell my vets, before your C&P, keep a note, or actually even before you have your psych exam, keep a note of things that bother you that you don't even think about, like what Maria was saying about picking up a cup. And what I've found a lot of veterans have said is their frustration and their irritability comes out on those loved ones, because it's not that, it's a frustration that they can't do it like they used to, or they can't do it like they saw themselves doing it years ago. Years ago you might have been able to, build a tree house in one day, and now it's like, I don't really see myself being able to build a tree house, so no, I don't want to build a tree house, it's not safe, or whatever it is. But the frustration is inside of you, and that's SSD. That's, how it affects you socially and occupationally. And I think, when you go to your C&P exams, one thing you have to remember is it's a provider on the other side. You don't know them, they don't know you, you're probably never going to see them again. Know your story, hold, be confident in, what you're gonna talk about. You don't want to go into too much detail, but you want to be vague enough that they hear what you're saying. And one more thing that I'd like to add is what I found a lot of C&P examiners lately is that they try to tie things back to your childhood, and they try to talk about how, what kind of childhood did you have, or your parents divorced, and they try to see, your PTSD stressors or whatever you have going on. Does it really have to do with the military, or does it have to do with your childhood? And just be prepared for that. Know your story, and know it cold. It's never a good day when you go to the VA and when they ask you how you're doing. They're not necessarily your friends, but they're not your enemies. So you want to talk to them as if it's just a stranger asking you questions, and just remember that, get what you need to across to them. But don't overdo it. Don't over exaggerate your symptoms. They see these kind of things. They know what they're dealing with, and that's a big thing too. Is just be honest, be upfront, and tell your story. Know your stressors and how it affects you day in and day out. And another thing I'd like to add is that when you go to your C&P examiners, sometimes they won't ask you point blank questions, so they're going to be probing. For example, if you maybe put that you have suicidal ideation on your questionnaire, they may not come out and ask you, how so do you have, how do you feel, do you have suicidal ideation? What they might ask you is, how do you feel about death? What are your thoughts about death? You can ask a C&P examiner, can you explain it, explain your question a little bit more, or can you explain where you're going? But a lot of times they're probing questions to try to find out, how do you really feel about suicide? How are you really feeling? And so, just keep that in mind. And I have one client that's one of my faves, and DP knows him. He's over preparer, and I know he's on here watching. But be careful about doing too much over preparing, because you don't want to make it out that you studied. This particular client did amazing, and he did a really good job. But some people can over prepare and just try to be, in the morning, wake up, maybe have a glass of coffee, a glass of water, take some deep breaths. And I always recommend trying to take the rest of the day off to kind of decompress and think about things. And I also do recommend that you write a letter of memo for record on how you think that the C&P went, just in case for some reason you have to go back, or maybe it didn't go quite as you wanted to. So that's something that I've just recently really started hitting home about, is writing a memo for record and talking about how your C&P went.
Because one point I put in there is, and the memorandum for record is key. So, tactical things, you're not having your best day, tell them everything, flare-ups, you're bad, you're worse on average, all those things. But for the over-preparing piece, control what you can control. I'm coming here to tell my truth. I don't care who's on the other side. I don't have time to Google review them and see. That's not my concern. I'm here to do one thing, which is to tell my story. Right? And afterward, I will put a memorandum for record as to how I felt. Was the examiner receptive or what have you? And if I feel that they were not, I will complain. I will reach out and say, I came here for an assessment to be heard for a certain thing. That did not happen. The person was late, was belittling, had a preconceived notion of who I was before even hearing my story, and basically was just not paying attention. I don't feel the C&P went the way it should have been. I would like to request a new one. That is how you have to attack these things. Not this person, the system. Stop. I'm here to tell my story. The C&P examiner did not do what they were supposed to do. I am requesting another one. That is how that goes. The memorandum of record is how you think it went, right? Because good or bad, you want to have that, because I've seen bad C&Ps that with a memorandum for record have been basically overturned, and they've thrown that C&P out and just looked at all the evidence. And I've seen C&Ps where everything was great and the examiner was crying with the veteran, and they walked out hand in hand, and it was an emotional thing to the point where the examiner couldn't do anything for the rest of the day. Well, guess what? The next day, 10 more clients came through, and he couldn't tell, or she couldn't tell, who was the person that they just had a moment with. And guess what? That person got denied, right? So it's literally like you can't call it until afterwards. So control the things you can control, but don't focus on the things that it's outside of your span of influence and control. Know your truth. Know what you can do. I was going to give a 5-minute warning, so we'll do 3 mics and then start shutting it down here. I just sent the flare to Brian, so he said, hey, you can stick around for a few more minutes, so I think we're good. A few things that we'll kind of bring up here, rapid fire, is some folks ask, would you mind if I DM you? Sure, send a message, brother. Don't know exactly who who specifically you're looking for, but you can definitely reach out to us. This is recorded, and you can share and see it again. There's links to reach out if you want to work with Amy If you're a veteran who has experience or is afraid to get help as it relates to military sexual trauma, both as a man or a woman, she is someone who's been through it herself and is able to be a source of support. So in our team, we kind of, help each other out in that capacity. If you want to work with Maria, same thing. Not only is she a coach, but coming from the medical side, being a nurse, she understands a lot of that, and also being a military spouse, so she understands that piece. So stay tuned for how to help your spouse file their claim and write their buddy statements. That's coming. And then Amy and Ken are going to come back for a segment on military sexual trauma, how to tell your truth, how to file that claim, and how to win. If you want to work with Amy or Maria, www.joinvac.com. It's been posted in the comment section, so you'll see that. You have the ability to pick either one. So joinvaci.com is where you'll be able to sign up. If you'd like to reach out, get more information from us, feel free to send a DM as well. A lot of good comments kind of came here, so I'm just kind of cycling through. I'm going to pop a few up here. Corey said, I wish my VSO was more helpful. In this conversation, really, it's information. We have VSOs who are working with us, who are clients. They mean well, but this is an ever-changing environment. So that's why we're doing this, right? To share information and basically help to, bridge that gap. Let's see here. Rowley, knowledge is power, indeed. Thank you for that, for sure. Hiram, thank you for your service. Semper Fi, indeed. Average Joe's champions, team rocks. You are correct. We do rock. We are team champions. Average Joe's who we are, but we have stood up and said that, you know what? Average Joe's just like us need someone to champion that fight. So that's what we choose to do. We are VACI champions. And let's see here. The bags, her service, thank you so much there for your service. Again, there's the link for those that may want to see it. Dennis said, great point. Good luck to you on your side of the house. Have a C&P coming up. Biggest thing is let them know, right? You might not have a bad migraine that day, or you might not be able to get full range of motion, but let them know how you are at your worst so they understand flare-ups. That's the part people tend to forget from time to time. A blog post also will follow. You'll see that here linked on this topic here that we put together. So you'll see that also in the comment section and pinned. John had a great call on his side of the house. Fingers crossed to you. At the end of the day, the takeaway here is, because of VACI, I know my symptoms and my rating criteria. And that's really what it comes down to, right? You were prepared to have the conversation, and now you go forth to do great things there. So fingers crossed for you indeed. Let's see here. But Steven says, great information, everyone. Thank you very much, my brother. Appreciate you, Steven. Good question that came up here. If I get diagnosed with 100% PTSD, am I still able to work? So having 100% in anything does not make you unemployable. If you file for TDIU, right, you're saying that I have total disability due to individual unemployability. I am unemployable. That said, if your symptoms rise to the level of 100%, regardless of the condition, really the argument is what kind of thing can you do, right? You have total occupational social impairment. For some individuals, it's very hard for them to find a thing to do, right? That gainful employment, what have you. So no, there's no bar that says you cannot do a thing, but you'd be cognizant to not put yourself in situations that are going to exacerbate the conditions you have, right? So really it comes down to what are those things that you honestly can do, right? If you're rated properly, right, you shouldn't have to, you don't have to put yourself in situations you don't need to. So the answer is no to that one. Let's see here. Let's see. So John said 100%. Half my SSD C&P was asking about my childhood. I knew and it was ready. I'm rated 70% now. And really, it's a cop-out, right? So alibi here. Caused or made worse by military service. Everyone focuses on cause. No one looks at made worse. Nothing says here that you have to, don't lie is what I'm trying to get to here. Things can be made worse by military service. Was it caused or made worse by military service? If something was made worse, it was made worse. What they're trying to do at times is find out if it's something that was pre-existing from before, right? You could have come from a broken childhood, come from a broken marriage, situation, what have you. Experienced trauma as a kid, moved on, you were good to go, served your country, you were great, things happened, and then it got really worse, right? You had a bad shoulder, bad condition, you got a waiver to go to military service. Guess what? That thing got worse, right? You had this condition, but now it's much, much worse. So it was made worse by military service. So that's the one part I think people try to cop out on because they don't know how to explain the symptoms and how things have got worse. Let's see here. We talked about the picture one. We got that there. Bernardo says, outstanding suggestions and info. You're very welcome. Glad that was helpful. Thank you for your service, Arlene. Appreciate you. Let's see here. Lisa here, if you enjoyed today's live, be sure to check out back next time we're on for sure. We'll be back. So more to follow. Let's see here. I don't get this question. What's a good part of your story? What a good part of your story to be sharing? Okay, I think it's a statement, so I'm gonna check it to that one there. Let's see here. You're very welcome, Fred. Just kind of scrolling here. Let's see here. Roger said, best decision I ever made. We're glad you're here. Let's see here. There was one question that Ensley had. I'm just looking for it here. The article again here for those that may see it. Matt, thank you for your comment. Psych eval in 15 days, nervous, trying to find records, but needs for free write. So yeah, use the information here and definitely, just lay it all out there, my brother. That's what I would say. Success favors the prepared. BACI helped me get prepared. Awesome, Roger. We love hearing that. Thank you, Emery. Let's see here. Just kind of going down. Let's see here. Is non-combat PTSD MST. So MST falls into the personal trauma side of the house. So there are instances where you may well have MST in a combat situation. So it's just a designation of whether or not it happened in combat or not. So to Amy's point, it comes down to being able to prove a thing, right? There's no record that we took IED incoming fire from point A to point B in combat. So awards and stuff kind of, give us that presumption of saying that kind of happened, right? Versus non-combat, it's saying, okay, well, if your car flipped over and you almost died doing the thing, where's the record of said things, right? In the absence of that, that's where buddy statement, support statement, things like that come into play to help that. DP, thanks for connecting me with this group. You're very welcome. Hey, Connie. Hey, how are you? Awesome. We're in Texas for a veteran event. That's awesome. Sure. Gotcha, Edward. I'll look out for your message here. Let's see here. How long does a decision take after a C&P? It varies. Lisa, can you copy and paste if you can Ensley's question, or Ensley, please pop it again. 'Cause I know I had marked to put it up, but I'll get back to yours here. As far as the decision, it really depends. Amy, how long was your last one? Well, no, that one didn't have a C&P, so that one doesn't count.
No.
I had a veteran who went to a C&P on a Wednesday. Had a bad C&P, memorandum for record went in, and then what happened was that same day he's like, hey, this was the worst, it's over. And I said, we talked about this, we're going for a memorandum for record. Memorandum for record went in, he called the 800-827-1000 number, complained about the C&P. That next day, Thursday, prep for decision. So he's like, oh, it's over now, DP, forget it. I tried, it's over. So what ended up happening was that Friday morning, he calls me up, he's like, I won my claim. I'm like, what? He's like, I won my claim. Wednesday, horrible C&P. The C&P examiner verbatim told him, you're like all the rest of them, trying to get over, you're wasting my time, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, absolutely not. Complained, memorandum for record, called in. Basically, they threw out that C&P, looked at all the other evidence the veteran had. The Friday morning, he was rated. So that's obviously not the norm. But it really depends really who's processing your claim, whose desk is it on, the workload, part of the country, so many different variables. But on average, you will see things like 30 to 90 days at times, depending on where you're at. Unless you're, one of Amy's veterans who literally had a 2-day turnaround. and that goes back to the same thing. So, is it possible to get a decision for C&P for chronic fatigue syndrome? Yeah. So, same thing on Amy's side. That's kind of what happened to the veteran, right? All the proof was there. They were able to make a decision on it and move forward. So, acceptable, credible, evidence there was able to be used for that. And they're doing a lot of those things.
And actually, his was a 10% for knee pain, and we went SSD, and he went 60% in 2 days. No C&P. So
there's that part.
There's that.
Alrighty, so I think that answers that question there.
I do want to say one more thing, if I can.
Yeah.
Okay, so with everything going on, now is a great time to get your claims in, because they are doing 24/7 right now, so there's not a lot of backlog. So a lot of the things, maybe not initials, but a lot of like increases, they are trying to get in and out pretty quick. And I know for me, I've seen a lot of my clients be able to get increases without C&Ps, or they get a C&P call within just a couple days of filing their claim. And so they're really working extra hard to try to keep up, so that when all this wears off, that they're not too backlogged. So now is the perfect time to get your claim in if you can.
Yeah, so to that point there, don't wait until things get back to normal and people start going to their local places, do things, because it's going to be a tsunami of people waiting to do stuff. So get in there now. David, to your point there, would recommend going to American Legion to file a claim. They may not be able to do it. Honestly, I'm of the mindset where if you can send an email and put an attachment to it, you can file a claim. You'd be surprised. It is not that difficult. If you go to va.gov and file a claim, you'll see it's going to literally ask you for your information. What are you trying to claim? What got worse? Verify your address, verify your information, upload some supporting document. There's a claim. So it's really much easier. So if you haven't gone to va.gov, give it a try. It's much more user-friendly than e-benefits that many of us have used. So it's very intuitive. If you answer no to this, it's not going to ask you all the other questions comes under it because you said no, right? So if you're not doing this, it'll go to the next subject and ask those questions. So I would say give it a try. But American Legion, these places, for some, it's a good resource to be able to go and kind of get that hands-on support to file the claim. But honestly, they've made it to where the veteran is empowered to file said claim. If you're working with a coach, they should have some videos and information available to you. Brian Reese just did one too, so that is available to you as well. Ensley, we did answer your question. I think that was the PTSD one, now that I went back up. So let's see here. I think that should be most of the questions there. Let's see here. For those deployed, can the VA do telemedicine for mental health while deployed? I have a claim ready. Afraid to submit it. Did I miss an appointment? So yeah, for many of those appointments, they're doing that. We've had veterans that are contracting right overseas, doing different things, and they've been able to kind of do that as well. So but I would always suggest be flexible should you be called in, right? So it's not guaranteed. They'll say just do that thing for telemedicine, right? They may call you in. So, but I would definitely not delay. But you let them know where you're at location wise, because they would be able to see, okay, obviously you can't make it down here or what have you. So. So aside of that, we really appreciate it. All of you kind of tuning in. Appreciate you, David. Lisa, thanks for supporting us here. Again, there's the link to the article that we have. joinvaci.com is where you can find us. We appreciate you guys spending some time with us. We hope this was helpful. I know we covered a lot of different things, but we want to do more of these lives to just share and give you guys a lot of good information. So definitely stay safe out there. Reach out to someone. Many of us don't have places to go and you're kind of stuck by yourself, and that's why we do what we do. Go into our mastermind group and definitely go to see some of the things we're doing. Bet Blitz, BC Experience, all the things we're doing in our group. It's just to kind of provide that community for you all. So more to follow. I'll let Amy and Maria say goodbye, and then we're out of here, y'all. Amy?
Thank you, everybody. This was a great opportunity to touch base with everybody, and just to put it out there, Vets Blitz is tonight. It's a lot of fun, so I hope that you guys can join us on that, and I look forward to doing more with you and hopefully working with some of you.
Maria?
Alrighty, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and yeah, stay tuned for more. Like DP said, we have a lot more coming, so Yep, we're glad to work with y'all. Thank y'all.
Bye, everybody. Take